Caroline, great to see you again. Thanks for taking some time to come all the way from Ireland to fly to California just to present today. And I'm going to let you take it away from here and introduce yourself. And let's dig right in because I'm curious to learn more. So,
Thanks a lot, David, and thanks everyone. It's lovely to see you here, and thanks for being interested. So my name's Caroline. I am only metaphorically flying today, which is just as well probably because I'm 9 hours away from you, time zone wise. And confusingly enough, I'm Irish, but I actually live in France. But I do a lot of work for the Wellbeing Economy Hub Ireland because I work for an Irish organization as well as being Irish. So I actually go back to Ireland quite a lot, and I'll be there next week, for example. So I'll be talking about my work with the Ireland Hub because that's a big focus for me. And I guess you all know what Wellbeing Economy Alliance is because you're in the Wellbeing Economy Alliance California. So I won't need to explain what that is, obviously. And just to mention one thing as well, I actually lived in California for about 6 years, from when was it? 1996 to 2002. It was a really interesting place for me to live. I was in the north, kind of Bay Area, and then northern Bay Area, Sonoma County, that sort of area. So yeah, it was really good experience. Good while ago now though. So anyway, I've good memories of that, and I absolutely love the nature of California a lot, as well as lots of other things. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing back from you as well, how things are going for you. Oh yes, and sorry, I see there's a question. What is WEAll from the students? So WEAll, it stands for Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and it's a global network of people and organizations who are working together to sorry, excuse me, to change the economy so that it serves people and planet rather than us kind of having to serve the economy. You know, it's like we all have to work hard and so on just to keep the economy going instead of the economy being kind of something that's designed by us and for us to support us and help us to live good lives, have a good quality of life, and for nature also to be well supported. So it's a kind of it's a, as I say, it's a network, and it's got hubs in lots of different parts of the world, and also individuals who are involved. And I'm involved in a hub in Ireland, but I'm actually also involved. I'll explain in a minute when I show my slides. I'm actually the organization I work for. It runs the Ireland Hub, but it also has some more sort of globally focused things it's doing. So because everything's so interconnected, you know, you can't just focus on one area of the world. Sometimes you have to kind of zoom out a bit as well. So shall I go ahead and share the slides, or okay, here we go. So apologies in advance. I'm going to have to show these without the like full screen view because it always freezes my computer when I do full screen view. So I'm
no
not even
problem
going
at
to
all.
try.
We're just happy to have you here. So,
So anyway, so this is so WEAll Ireland. We have the way we've kind of evolved. There are different hubs, as I said, in different places, and they have different structures. And some of them are only individuals, and some of them are groups, and some of them are a mixture. And for no particular reason that I know of, we sort of ended up being groups mostly. So we are a network of groups, and we're actually, as you probably know, Ireland has two jurisdictions. It's the southern part is independent, and then the northern part's part of the UK. But the northern part also it has some autonomy as well. It has its own little parliament and so on. So we are very focused on peace building, and we actually have an all island hub without, you know, any kind of militantism or anything at all. Just, you know, very much in the spirit of peace. But we have organizations on both sides of the border, and so the organization I work for is called Feasta, which is a funny word. It looks like Feasta. It's actually an Irish word. It's from the Irish language, and it means from now on or henceforth. And so we're really focused on the economy and what they call ecological economics. So it's very much that same idea, making the economy work for people and planet. And then you see to the just below that, there's Queen's University Belfast. So that's in the north. That's an academic organization, as you can guess, at a university. Then there's a health organization, which is kind of even focused on Europe. So it's sort of, yeah, just happens to be based in Ireland. Cultivate, which is it's very much into participation, groups, facilitation, discussions. The Playhouse is a theatre because we work with artists, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And then you can see this thing called IDEN, which is on the top right there. That stands for Irish Donut Economics Network. And I don't know if any of you have heard of donut economics, but we can talk about that later too if you're interested. But that's another related thing. So we're all working together. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but this is Feasta, the organization I work for. And that green thing on the top there, that circle is the economic donut. And so we want to make the economy so that it works within planetary boundaries, and it also meets people's social and economic needs. And so we have all these different things we're working on to try and help that to happen. And I won't, as I say, read this out in detail now because it would take the whole time. But that's kind of, we're running the hub on that sort of basis. And so one of our big focuses is intergenerational fairness. So it's this whole idea of thinking longer term and planning so that, young people who are alive now, but also people who aren't even born yet, so that they so that their rights will be respected. So it's a really interesting challenge because a lot of the way that economic planning is done now is very short term, or it even discounts the future. So it's a kind of inversion of the way that a lot of these things are planned at the moment. So we're taking a lot of inspiration from actually Wales, which is nearby, which I'm sure you probably know is part of the UK, and it's like Northern Ireland. It's got its own little government, so it's kind of half independent but not completely of the UK, and it's got its own future generations commission, and it's been doing really interesting work. So we're sort of modeling what we're doing on what they're doing, and we've had various meetings and webinars and things, and we're part of a coalition that's working on this sort of whole idea of intergenerational fairness. And because we're in the European Union, there's actually work going on that level now too. That guy with the European flag there with the stars in the background, he's the commissioner, which is kind of like it's like a minister really, and he's in charge of intergenerational fairness in the European Union. So we're working a bit with that group as well. And what we've come up with is we had some workshops earlier in the year. We were really lucky. We got a little bit of funding from different things, and we put on two workshops, and they were really interesting with people who were working in the government in the north and the south, and also just people from business, from industry, people from a little bit of trade unions. We would have liked more. We're working on that. Quite a lot of people from charities, community sector. And so we all had discussions about, well, what would the economy look like if it was fairer to future generations and to young generations and so on. And we came up with some ideas, and they're in a little document, and I put a chat. I'll put a link to it in the chat later. So that's the thing on the left, on the right, the green thing there. So that's some of the work we're doing. And then we also, I mean, everything's interconnected, all of these different things, so we're also working on changing the way that taxation is done so that it's taxing things that aren't really very good for the economy, like, for example, speculation. Like at the moment, in Ireland, and I think it's the case in California as well, there's a lot of money gets put into property buying and so on, and it's not always just to have a place to live. Sometimes it's investment funds, and they want to maximize their profits from that. But the problem with that is that it's actually a need. It's a basic need to have somewhere to live. So if you're doing that, then you're actually draining money away from things in the economy where they're actually needed. And you're also encouraging hoarding of land as well. So we're looking into ways to change the way this tax structure is managed, so this is it's much more equitable, and so that you're taxing the things you want to discourage rather than things that you want to encourage. So we've done a lot of work on that. We had a little project just about housing, because that's a big issue in Ireland, especially in the south. There's been a big boom there in the last 20 years or so. There's a lot of actually American companies, big pharma, and then also big tech, Google, Apple, Facebook, and so on. And some of the, like, for example, Pfizer has a lot of factories there. So there's a lot of actual work that happens. There's also some not so great tax stuff going on, which is partly the fault of the Irish government. But anyway, for one reason or another, there's been this kind of rush of money in. And then what's happened is that a lot of it's kind of been diverted into property funds and things like that, and sort of left to the private sector to manage. And the trouble is, it's not just individual landlords; it's these big investment funds, and then they come in and they take up loads of property, loads of land. Sometimes they just sit on it to wait and see if it gets more expensive so they can sell it on or whatever. In any case, it's all about trying to make money rather than provide an actual need. So we did a project about different ways to approach this. And there's a lot of, it's a big generational thing in Ireland. A lot of young people can't get housing, so it's a real problem. A lot of students have to commute ridiculous amounts. And then there's also really stoking up ideas about, racism, immigration problems, fears, that kind of thing. There's a lot of sort of inaccurate information circulating about who's responsible for these problems. So it's a very important thing to think about. So we've had focus group, we had a big session at the conference that we had, which I'll talk about. We had another little conference just about housing, and then we came up with a little report. And basically we're asking about working kind of upstream again on things like tax, but also debt is a big issue. Obviously, when you're talking about housing, it's the biggest debt most people have is mortgage, so it's a huge thing. So there's some very important things to sort of tease out and think about there. And then also downstream sort of changes in, the way property is owned and management. You can have community-led housing, you can have co-housing. There's all kinds of different models. And a lot of those in Ireland are actually very unexplored and could really be looked at more. So we were looking at that. And then also sort of more systemically, I don't know if you've ever come across the idea of systems thinking or complex dynamic. I hope I'm not getting too technical here, but anyway, it's basically the idea that you've got different ways that you can the economy is like a living organism. It's not like a mechanical thing that just sort of obeys mechanical laws, where you get to some sort of equilibrium and everything's stable and steady. It's actually very complex and dynamic. So sometimes if you just change one little thing, it can have a huge effect. It can kind of cascade and make lots of different changes all over the place. So it's both scary but also a good opportunity, because sometimes you can do something that really has a big effect, and it's not that big a thing to actually carry out. So there's lots of different things that can be done. Some of them be ambitious, some of them less ambitious. But a lot of it has to do with basically sharing power more equally as well. So there's all kinds of different things. We're also working a bit on the financial system in Ireland and elsewhere. And I won't go into that in detail now either, because that could be like an hour or more. And we're also the reason I put this up is also because it's connected as well. It's got to do with having access to food, because it's certainly in Ireland. Ireland's a funny one because it's very fertile, and it exports an awful lot of food, but actually it has to import food because it doesn't actually create a balanced diet itself. It's like it exports an awful lot of dairy and beef, and it doesn't really produce very much just fruit and vegetables, which actually grow quite well, but it's just the way the economy has evolved. Again, it's very based on basically trying to expand as much as you can, trying to expand, trying to maximize profits. So there's a big emphasis on that, and because dairy in particular is very lucrative when you export it from Ireland, there's a big emphasis on that. And so, but there's actually, yeah, it's got the reputation of being very environmental, the agriculture, and unfortunately it's really not, because there's a lot of nitrogen and fertilizers and inputs that are used for the dairy, and then that goes into the groundwater and it affects biodiversity and so on. So there's lots of work to work on there too, but it all boils down to a lot of the same ideas, need to sort of decentralize power and make it easier for people to shorten supply chains and make it easier for people to get what they need more quickly and easily, and and have a healthy diet as well. And then we're also doing some work with artists, and that's another whole issue, another whole stream, because one of the interesting things with WEAll is that they talk about movement building, like working with lots of people all over, and then they talk also about affecting like policies, so talking to decision makers directly, but then they also talk about narrative change, so changing the stories we tell about the economy and how we want to live, because there's a lot of assumptions that are made about what the economy is or what it's for, and a lot of times it's like, I sometimes find I haven't even thought about, why am I assuming this, and I have to kind of stop and think, well, maybe that's not the best way to think about the economy. And so we're working with different artists in different ways. There's the guy in the middle there with the video, the YouTube thing with his hand like that. He's a well-known musician in Ireland. John Spillane is his name. We're also working with visual artists and storytellers and the theatre, like I said. We have a little website just for artists called Cultural Creatives. So again, just looking at different ways of thinking about the economy. It's an ongoing thing. We don't have a huge big vision or anything. It's more like little things, but it's very interesting. It's very stimulating and it's fun as well. We've had some really interesting workshops working with them. So then just very quickly, I don't know, how am I doing for time, David? Have I got a little bit of time?
Yeah, if we could wrap up in a few minutes, that'd be great.
Great, yeah. So I just thought I should explain also that we had a big conference 2 years ago called Rethinking Growth, and so it was rethinking the idea of economic progress. Because people always say we need economic growth, and a lot of times it's the same. It's like you don't really think, well, what actually is economic growth? What does that mean? What does that word mean? Economic growth, that phrase, and a lot of times it's conflated with the idea of gross domestic product growth. In other words, more and more and more and more production and consumption and just endless, more and more and more and more and more. And, it's not really very good for society to just pile up with stuff, and traffic jams and all the rest. And it's also not very good for the planet. But there are things we can have more of. We like quality of life and good relationships and quality of work. And there's loads of things that we need more of. But what do we want to grow? That's the question, really. So what should be growing? So it was a rethinking growth. And we were delighted with how much interest there was in it. And it was actually a follow-on from a similar one that has happened in Europe in the European Parliament the year before, which is also we were delighted by how much interest there was. So it's been very there's been a huge amount of interest in this whole thing, and we have another project now. We're going to be doing another conference next year, which is more international in Cork, in the south of Ireland, and we're really emphasising the role of democracy and participation, and the need to hear from lots of voices about what is economic progress and how to fit within planetary boundaries. So it's called Regenerative Democracy is the project, and we're working with loads of different organisations on that, including the Irish Tourist Board, which is interesting. I didn't expect that, and it's quite nice to have them on our side. So yeah, I'll stop for the moment, but I'm delighted to answer any questions you might have or just exchange thoughts or comments, So yeah, thanks
Great.
for listening so far.
Thank you. That's great. I'm very jealous, which is always a good sign. And I have loads and loads of questions, but I'll open it up to everyone else first. Just please ask. We're looking for people to ask actual questions as opposed to supporting or promoting a project, and then just ask if we can keep it to one question so we can get as many people to take a turn as possible. That'd be great. Stephen, hello. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Caroline, that was wonderful. Wonderful presentation and wonderful work that you're doing. I'm just so impressed. I'm not in WEAll, California. I live in Maryland, but I am loving WEAll California's work and come to some of their webinars. And I've got two very short questions. One, just very short. One is, I know you work with WEAll, the donut economics people, and I just wondered if there are any differences between you. And the other question is, you said there's the obstacle is capitalism on one of the slides you gave, and I wondered how that goes over. Those are my two questions, David, if you
Thank
don't
you. Those
mind.
are great questions, especially the second one, but they're both good. Yeah, so deal. We don't really have any ideological difference with them at all. The only difference is exactly what we're doing. We're sort of just working on different parts of the work, as it were, a bit. So deal, for those who don't know, is Donut Economics Action Lab, and I actually use them a lot. Their work a lot because I do a little bit of teaching as well. I lecture ecological economics in a university in Dublin. And they have all these wonderful slide sets with resources you can use, so they're very focused on education, and it's brilliant if you're working in education. It's so useful. And they have an emphasis now on secondary, on like high school as well. High school people here. So yeah, they have quite a lot of things you can look at, and all kinds of workshops, and like interactive things you can do, which is brilliant. And then yes, the capitalism word, yes. So I we tend to the problem we've had with, or the challenge we've had with using the word capitalism, is that everybody seems to have their own definition of it. So for some people, it means um, basically, any economy where the government isn't running every single thing. So it's like any economy where there's a market system of some kind, even if it's just small businesses or whatever. Whereas for other people, it's like it means basically an economy that's built on growth that depends on endless expansion of GDP. And I find that because there's these two definitions, there tends to be this thing where people are talking past each other, and you're not really, unless you can all agree on the definition, then it's fine. But I mean, if it's defined as an economy that needs to grow all the time, then yeah, I think we need to have a different system for sure. But if it's defined as an economy where you're able to have your own business, but it's just not supposed, you can't have a business that'll just expand forever, but a business that's viable, where you have some autonomy, then I think it's okay. But it just depends on how you're defining it, really. So yeah, if we're asked about it, that's what we say. But yeah, that was one of the artists who wrote that, and I think that came from the conference. So it was some of the things that were said at the conference. So yeah, I for me, the main thing is really we need a much more equal, equitable economy which isn't dependent on expanding all the time. And
Yeah.
you know, I want to say that means the end of capitalism. That's fine. So that's yeah. Not everybody would say that. So but that's whatever. So I hope that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you
So
very much. It
thank you.
does.
And thank you for the compliment, Stephen. So I'll ask a question about the future generations work. Um, how is that being received by elected officials? Is it something that you feel there's a lot of support for, a lot of resistance to, and maybe, what stage of the work are you in at the moment?
Yeah, so that's a good question because in Ireland, there's a few things going on. There's this bill which is for a future generations commission to be formed, and it's uh, one of those things that sort of has a lot of lip service support, but hasn't really got very far. Could get a lot further. It was introduced by a very pleasant, likable. It's the equivalent of a representative, what they call a TD. It's like an MP in Britain. What would you call that? A representative, I suppose, in the parliament. And he was from the Green Party. And at the time, this is the previous government from the one now, the Greens were in coalition. Anyway, long story short, there was an election. The Greens lost a lot of seats. He lost his place. And then the bill is still there, but it's just sort of sitting there. It hasn't really moved. And there are other people in the parliament who say they support it, but they haven't really done anything. So we're talking to them, but it's a bit of a, it's not, yeah, it could be going better. But on the broader picture, it's more positive in the sense that we're also working. We have this document that I put on my slides. We're working on various long-term sort of governance things. And the thing about this bill is that it's not a silver bullet anyway. It was fairly modest in scope. In ways it maybe ought to have been more ambitious. It might have even got more traction, strangely, if it was a bit more ambitious, because there might have been more interest, because the Welsh model is really very clever, and it goes further than what this bill proposes.
Right.
In the Welsh model, I don't know if you've heard about this, but so basically, they did this really clever process where they worked first through surveys and focus groups with the public to gather goals, what they wanted Wales to be like. So it was very participatory, and then they used that and they built this. They created this commission for future generations, and they use these goals, and they kind of boiled it down to 7 goals, and then they use these goals as a kind of test. And the commission, what they do is whenever the government comes up with a new policy, it has to run it by the commission. It has to show it to them. And then the commission says, well, how is this policy helping to meet the seven goals? And the government has to spell out, explain how they think that's going to meet the seven goals. And just the very fact of having to think about it is actually making difference. For example, the Welsh government was going to spend its entire budget on expanding a freeway. And it was like a massive amount of money, and it was a very small stretch of road, and it was very controversial. It was going through a nature preserve, and a lot of people in Wales don't even have a car. I mean, it was really, yeah, very uneven in its benefits. Insofar as there were benefits at all. So anyway, when they were forced to look at all these different ways in which it was supposed to be helping Wales, like the seven goals, which include the environment and equity and health as well, and loads of things. They actually ended up changing their minds totally, and they started putting the funding into public transport and the trains and so on instead. So there was a big shift. So just being forced to think in that longer term way was
Right.
really helpful. So that's what we're hoping, something like that can happen. And there are other ways to help bring it about. Like Finland, another good example. They're doing a lot of long-term work, and they have this whole sort of governance, set of different organizations working together on the government level to focus on that. So our recommendations are they kind of learn from all of these different examples, really. And yeah, what we're hoping is that there'll be, yeah, what gives me a bit of hope is that as I mentioned, we had two workshops with policymakers, and we were first of all really surprised and pleased by how interested they were. Like we had one in the north in Belfast, and a lot of times in Ireland, it's famous that people in the south just aren't very interested in the north. It's like who cared about the north? But loads of people went up to the north. Like they were really pleased they came up for our workshop. And we were delighted, and then there was just so much interest in the subject. And the same, then we had one in Dublin, it was the same. So loads of good ideas and lots of interest. So I just feel like it's kind of, you have to just keep chipping away, and eventually you'll hit a tipping point and things could change. But I think you have to just keep at it, and talking is really important, even if you really disagree with the other people.
Right. Yeah.
Talking is so important. Like, yeah.
Thank you. That's so helpful. I have more questions, but just want to make sure everybody else feels comfortable. Kirsten.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation and insights. Just to touch on what you just mentioned about the workshops with policymakers, how do you structure those, and what are the ways that you engage policymakers in these new ideas?
Yeah, thank you.
What do you do? Yeah, thank you.
Another great question. Yeah, so we were very careful about it. I must say we put a lot of thought into it. For example, a part of the groundwork we laid was that when we had our conference, we invited one of the most the Minister for Finance, he's like really, highfalutin. But Ireland's a small country, so maybe it's easier in a small country. But what we did was we put a lot of thought into it. We read a lot of what he said. I only agree with about half of it, maybe less, but anyway, we read it. We came up with a way to talk to him where we were using language he'd understand, but was also not just saying, "Oh, we agree with you. You're wonderful." So then, and thankfully, he was up for coming and talking to us at the conference. And then when he was at the conference, he invited us to participate in a thing called the National Economic Dialogue, which is another. And it probably helps that we have these structures for talking to people, which is a help. But anyway, long story short, we just really, wherever we had a possible connection, we really cultivated it. We really tried to figure out, well, what are these persons' interests? What's their angle? What's motivating them? Or what would make them feel like, oh, these are people I can talk to. So we did that. And then also the structure of the workshops, we put a lot of thought into that. For one thing, they're Chatham House, so in other words, yeah, people can come and they can be completely open and say whatever they want and not get in trouble. And that's important because it's a safe space thing. It's just making it so that because yeah, it's true that if you're in the public eye and you're saying things that could be just pounced on, and ripped apart, that makes you very vulnerable. So, we wanted to be able to make it so that people could actually reflect and, actually be honest themselves and not feel like they have to hide stuff. So we made the Chatham House, and then in our reports we didn't say who said what or anything like that. And then we also we made the structure quite playful too. Like we have a really wonderful the person who runs the Irish Donut Economics Network, whose logo was on the thing. She's really good at facilitating as well, and the Cultivate people are. So we did a lot of we did I mean they did various different things, but just sort of icebreakers, but also visioning and writing things, drawing things, even if you're terrible at drawing, all this sort of thing. And it was great because it did make it much more sort of light and easy to engage. So yeah, we combined loads of different techniques basically, but I suppose for me, like just to come back to what I said earlier, I'm actually originally from Northern Ireland, and I lived in the south as well. I lived in the south from when I was 12 on, but my youngest years were in the north, and it was when there were the Troubles, which I'm sure you've heard of, and there was violence and there were problems. And for me, a big thing I've learned from all of that is just, like I say again, that's the importance of talking, even if you find the other people's views repugnant, just to find a way to talk, because otherwise the alternative is so awful. I mean, unfortunately, there's problems in Belfast now again. You may have seen the news, you know. Yeah, it's like, yeah, you have to find a way to talk, I think. And yeah, I think having this kind of workshop is helpful. And yeah, one other thing I could mention is actually just intergenerational justice and long-term thinking. We found those are actually really good for just a framing for depolarizing. They do attract people across the spectrum politically, and that's quite good if you want to be able to engage with people and not sort of immediately get defensiveness and yeah, blocking. So that is, we found it quite useful, and I think the people in Wales have also found that. There are some people on the far right who just don't want anything to do with it, but a lot of other people are quite open to it, and it is a very good. I mean, yeah, it's I suppose that I know there's a global survey that's really interesting, and that shows that a big part of what people say motivates them to want to do something about climate is love for younger generations. So
In fact, Caroline, you said the framing was very helpful, but you said it fast and I didn't catch it all. Would you just restate what the framing was? Like, was it
yes,
long-term generational?
yeah. Well, there's different things, but intergenerational fairness is a good one
Okay,
to
thank you.
work well. Yeah, yeah.
Speaking of which, would any of our high school students like to ask a question and get some equal time? If not right now, in 5 minutes or so, just want to encourage you to ask a question, or anyone else here who hasn't asked a question yet. All right. Well, I've got one on housing then. You identified it as one of the major issues. If I'm understanding what you're doing, it seems like you're more in the information gathering stage and community participation stage, as opposed to having transitioned to making some recommendations or anything like that. Is that accurate? And if so, maybe talk a little bit more about the information gathering stage.
Yeah, I mean, we have come up with some recommendations, but I think we could do more on that. So yeah, in terms of the gathering, it's similar. We've had workshops, we had a focus group, we had a session at this big conference that we had with, a panel and then questions, and then we had a smaller conference as well, just about housing, just a little day-long thing. And then we gathered everything up and put it in a report. And then we've also been talking, we bring in people, we've had online meetings with people in other places as well, because there's a lot of interesting work going on elsewhere. So yeah, but I would think there's still more that could be done for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of recommendations, like I said, there's the whole issue of tax and what the way the property tax, for example, in Ireland is. It's very sort of, I suppose you could call it conventional, but it's it's sort of, if you improve your house, like if you make it more ecological or retrofit or whatever, then the price goes up and then you pay more property tax. So, that kind of thing. Whereas if you had a land value tax instead, then you wouldn't have to do that. And, and it would also discourage speculation on land. So there's, I think there's a student with a question, but anyway, yeah. So yeah, sorry, it's not a very complete answer, but that's one of the things we're interested in. And there's
No,
also just plain old state investment as well, because it's as I say, it's very captured or dominated at the moment by big investment funds, and whose goals don't really align with the goals of
yeah.
lots. So yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
couldn't give you an answer for California if you asked me the same question. So I totally understand it's a very complex issue. Yeah, would someone like to come up and come to the mic and ask a question? If you want to turn on the camera, that's great. If you don't, that's okay too. So please go ahead. I see that the mic's off, but not hearing anyone yet.
You can also put it in the chat if you want.
Yeah, if the mic's not working, feel free to put it in the chat and I'll ask it out loud. So, all right, well, we could come back if you're able to get the mic working, or if not, please pop it in the chat. Anyone else have a question for Caroline? Oh, I think we hear you now. Well, we heard you for a millisecond. All right. No one else? Then while we're waiting for Gilroy,
I can pop in with a question while we're waiting. Caroline, thank you so much for everything you've shared so far. I noticed in your slides you have plentiful logos and all the different organizations that you are collaborating with. And I was just wondering kind of how you manage that internally, what kind of processes you use in WEAll Ireland to make sure everybody's voices get heard and meaningfully contribute to the projects you're working on as a group, and just how that all works on an internal kind of level.
Thank you. Another great question. Yeah. So we're doing a bit of rejigging at the moment, actually, because it is a bit unclear, how who gets to say what and when and all the rest. So we're
Oh,
ready
is
to
it
launch.
working?
Oh, carry on. Sorry, I can come back to you, Jesse. If you hello. Oh,
yeah, we can hear you at Gilroy. At least we did for a couple seconds.
Can you hear us now?
We
yes.
can.
Oh, okay. Sorry for the interruptions, Jesse. Sorry, we were trying to troubleshoot.
Please go ahead and ask the question while we've got your mic working. We'll come back to Jesse.
Okay, well, hello. My name is Amy. I'm a junior here at Gilroy High. And well, first, I'd just like to say thank you for all of the information that you shared with us. It's very, very insightful. So the question I have is, what could we do as high schoolers to take a step forward in actually protecting our environment? I feel like a lot of the time we just get handed a lot of information, but we don't have actual, like, I guess, solutions into like taking things into our own hands and like taking a step further and actually trying to save our planet. So do you guys have any suggestions?
Thank you. That's a
Thank you,
great
Amy.
question.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, I think a really important thing is to just join networks, join groups, find like-minded people and join up. And I think I'm sure there's lots of interesting things going on in California around climate. So I think it's I mean, I have a daughter actually who's 17, and she's very interested in the environment. So she's joining, she's a senior, but she's senior level, but she's joining, groups around here that are working on all kinds of different things. And it really depends also on what your interests are. Like if you want to do something hands-on, there's probably, I imagine there are things you can do which are very hands-on, like planting trees or restoring streams and so on. And then if you want to do something more theoretical, I'm sure there are organizations working on that too. I mean, maybe even WEAll California. I'm not sure what you can tell me, but yeah, I would say find people to work with. I think that's really important, and also because it's very daunting to try and work on something like that by yourself. But I think if you find other people who are
Yeah.
doing That's really important. I'm also happy to answer if you want to email me after with questions, you're welcome to do it because I might think of other things later, but that's the first thing that popped into my head anyway. So yeah, I don't know if it's helpful, but
No, I would say the same thing that, learning from other people on specific techniques to do, but also as a collective, you build more power to actually try and drive change as opposed to alone and just learn different techniques. So I think it's a great answer. Yeah. And feel
Yes,
free to
oh yes, sunrise movement. Somebody's put that in the chat. That's a good one. Yeah, yeah. If you haven't heard of that, I would check into it. Yeah, yeah.
thank you guys so much for the wonderful responses.
thank you. All
Very
right.
well.
So Caroline, do you want to add anything to the thought about internal team dynamics and collaboration among organizations?
Yeah, sure. So the way it's kind of evolved without us consciously meaning it to. So we're sort of rejigging it a bit because at the moment we have, as I said, we have these groups which are our core, and that actually works very well because we have monthly meetings of just the core group, to plan and so on. Where it's a bit more fluid is people or groups who are interested but don't want to be in the core group, but want to keep in touch and so what we're working on now is a nice structured way that, we're thinking of making an option where if you want to just be in touch, but not like be doing a lot of work, but just be in touch, where you can sign up and for example, we might have a twice yearly bigger meeting of groups or people, just to keep people in the loop. We do have a mailing list and that really helps. And we have a website, but we're actually in the middle. That's the big part of the rejigging is actually really the website. We're working on that because that's going to have a portal then where you can sign on for different levels of engagement. I mean, yeah, that's kind of the way we function. But for example, the big conference we're having next year for that, we have I don't know if you've come across sociocracy. It's like yeah, it's a system for making decisions in a big group where you don't want to have to decide. I'm getting an applause. So yeah, where it would be very cumbersome to just have decide everything as a whole big group. But so you split into smaller circles, and then you make decisions within the circles, and then you feed back into a governance or coordination circle. So there's a bigger group of people working on the conference, and so that's what we have as our structure. And yeah, for that kind of bigger thing, then would use something like sociocracy. Yeah, because to try and get that balance right between making sure people have a voice, but also making sure there's a clear process where you can get things done. So, but yeah, we're learning all the time. We don't have it perfect, but yeah, it's good to be learning as well about these things. So yeah.
Is there anyone else who hasn't asked a question who'd like to ask one? All right. Well, I'll keep going then. I got tons for Caroline. So, one of the things that's really impressive is all these in-person events that you're doing, conferences or community feedback sessions and so forth. And, our state is very large geographic area, and it's been hard, I think, to get traction in one specific location. There's so many different things and so many different things going on. So any suggestions or tips for how to get enough people, like, the conference that you had last year looked amazing. And just trying to figure out any tips on how do you get people to show up for these sort of feedback sessions or conferences. What is some of the techniques you've used to help build interest?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, like I said before, the choice of words is important. Just framing things in a way that's digestible, where people can understand. But even there, it is a challenge. Not everybody gets it, but I just feel like more people get it than used to, which is nice, But it's hard to put a finger on what exactly, you know, yeah, what helps, what's been helping that, because 10 years ago we weren't nearly as well known. Like, we're much better, we're getting much more attention now, and part of it might just be the way things are going in the world.
Yeah.
It's people think differently, which is yeah. But
The good and the bad of that, right? Yes.
yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a cliche, it's a crisis, but also the opportunities when there's a crisis. So, um, um, yeah. So how have we got people interested? I mean, also again, I think using the arts has been
Mm.
really helpful. Like when we had our conference, we had people doing graphic harvesting all the time, and we did videos from the conference, little videos, with music,
Yeah.
and we I think we want to do more of is the social media engagement. We do it a bit, but not a whole lot, but that's something was a lot of potential, I guess, and we're planning to do it more for our conference next year. Um, and yeah, we're going to be doing we've got an invitation to do some radio interviews as well, so that should be good. And we do podcasts. I forgot to mention that before.
Oh, wow.
They're a bit sporadic now. We used to do them regularly, and
Yeah.
they were really used but then we kind of ran out of steam a bit, but we do them a bit. So we have one probably coming up in about a week. So um but yeah, I think just trying loads of different mediums and ways to talk is good, and yeah, in terms of, I mean, could I ask, where are you all located? Are you all over the state, or some of you out of state, or yeah, okay.
Well, so there's four of us who are on the working group here today, Jesse, Kirsten, and Lauren, and myself. Everyone else is part of our larger community, which can be people in different parts of the state, or, as with Stephen, who spoke before, we get people dropping in from other states, since there
Yeah.
isn't another WEAll Hub, official hub in the US at the moment. So yeah, it's very geographic. Like, I have met Jesse in person once years ago, but not the others yet. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
part.
Yeah, since it's such a big state,
Yeah,
yeah, I see. But yeah, on the other hand, I mean, to be honest, we mostly meet online too, even though
yeah,
we're it is nice to be able to meet in person, but we don't do it
yeah,
all out really.
yeah.
We mostly do it online as well. Yeah. Yeah. But if you can find a way to meet up at least once, I'd
Mm.
recommend it, if you're able to, because it is just really nice to see everybody in person. It was amazing the first time we
Yeah.
met, because we all met during COVID, so we didn't really meet in person for about 2 or 3
Yeah.
years. So yeah.
We do have some local projects going on, and we just had our first education conference. So there are some in-person gatherings and so forth, but it is a little logistically different. So, Sandy, hi, good to see you again. Go ahead.
Hi, David. It's great to be back. One reason you haven't seen me for a while is I've temporarily relocated to Oregon to be closer to my very elderly parents. And it's been a little chaotic, but I'm really
Sure.
glad to be here. And Caroline, thanks for this presentation. I will just briefly say my background is more on the well-being side than the economic side. And I was actually a consultant on the Healthy Ireland initiative when the health executive was developing that. Yeah. And that's really where I became very interested in combining well-being and positive psychology with systemic change. Um, and here in the States, one big issue we have is disproportionate both health outcomes, but also impact of climate issues on low income communities and populations. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that in terms of the work you're doing in Ireland, or is that not as much of an issue? I mean, the example right now is the data centers that are being built and are very disproportionately impacting lower income communities. So, and you mentioned having tech companies coming into Ireland too. So, I just wonder if there's anything you'd want to say about that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's actually a huge thing in Ireland. Ireland's 20% of Ireland's electricity is for data centers now. It's the highest in the world proportionally. And it's Ireland, partly why there are so many Oh, there's one being built in Gilroy. Ooh, yeah. Part of why it's they are attracted to Ireland is because Ireland has lots of water, but the issue is that still it's not infinite, and it's also a huge sap on the electricity supply. So yeah, they're very controversial, to put it mildly. And so. I feel like it's really good to be talking to people elsewhere in the world, such as yourselves, who are having these problems, because I think the solution is to join up together and figure out a plan. I think that's what we need to do, because I think one country can't do much by itself. What the government always says is, oh, we need to be competitive. Big word is competitive. We need to be competitive, and we need to yeah, we if we don't do it, somebody else will, and we need to have, and they talk a lot about jobs. They're not all that great for jobs, really, but but bringing in money for revenue and so on and so forth. And I mean, there are ironies in it too, because some of the companies use renewable power, which sounds great, but the trouble is they're actually then other people aren't getting access to that renewable power, because the companies are taking it, so it's like, yeah, it's all a bit strange, really. So yeah, I think we need to join forces. Actually, I'd love to find a way to do that. So I see we got a yes from the high school as well. So yeah, maybe there should be a global coalition or something about the data centers, because I really feel like, yeah, I'm actually in contact with people in Virginia state as well who are impacted, because it's a huge thing there too, as you may know. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a global coalition is a great idea because where's our democracy on this? The vast majority of people are against it, and it just keeps moving, marching forward. So,
Yeah, yeah, and we keep
um,
being told, though, there's nothing you can do, and it's all wrapped up with AI as well. It's like, oh, AI is going to take over, and there's nothing we can do, and it's progress and it's great. And I mean, I'm not against absolutely all technology by any means, but I just think we need to think about this a bit, and not just yeah. Anyway,
Yes,
that's
I'm with you 100% on that. So,
yeah, technology for good, and
yeah,
also like, yeah, in service of people, not, yeah.
right.
The most successful piece of propaganda maybe in history is the conflation of capitalism with democracy, when in fact they're just incompatible.
yeah, yeah.
Well, hope everyone will join me in thanking Caroline for her time and for staying late on a school day. And just, you're doing amazing work out there, and so glad to be able to really learn more about it. And hopefully, we can replicate some of the great things you're doing. So,
Well, thank you, and it's great to hear from you as well. And actually, I would have loved to have heard more about what you're doing, but that'll another time.
we can take a
Yeah,
couple minutes for that, sure.
yeah.
Um, does anyone on our team want to share a bit about what we're doing besides me, so I don't hog the mic? I'll take that as a no, not at this moment. Um, anyway, yeah, so Lauren is working on a business guide right now on what businesses could do to support a well-being economy. Kirsten is working on a city and county guide on how local governments can help accelerate well-being economies. We're doing a state policy guide showing different organizations that are trying to pass statewide level legislation on that, match a lot of what we talk about as a well-being economy. We've got an education group that's going to produce a white paper on how universities can help further well-being economies. And then we do a lot of events like this, where we bring in people to talk and spotlight what they're doing so that we can learn from them and hopefully share good ideas out further into the world. So that's some of it. And we're always looking, what can we do next? What can we do better? Because we certainly haven't gotten it all figured out yet. And as I imagine with what you're describing on the Future Generations Act, that, there's certain things that people say sound good, but then when you start to nail down the details and put it into practice, that's where the other interests come into play and start making sure that things don't pass. So just really seeing, it's not just the ideas, but how do we actually get them enacted and keep them supported once they're enacted. So yeah,
Yeah, thank you. That sounds really great. All the
yeah.
things you do in so many different areas too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's thanks to everybody who shows up to volunteer and support what we're doing, and we're mostly volunteer powered. So just trying to expand our group and keep, like you said, 10 years later, it's a different story. It's people are maybe more ready to hear it, and also just, maybe develop and improve our skill sets a little better. So
Yeah, it's great.
yeah.
It's very inspiring.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you again. Really appreciate this. Thanks everyone for coming. And we've got our next event, which is how to pass legislation at the state level in California on June 25th. So we'll have a couple speakers on that. So thanks everyone.
Thanks very much, David. And
Thank
so
you
much
so